If a lover brings an orange and peels it carefully, if with a knife
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. Thank you for joining me to listen in on a conversation that I'm about to have with soprano Fotina Naumenko. She's got a new album out called Bespoke Songs, which is absolutely fascinating. And what you're listening to now is If a Lover Brings an Orange. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Fotina Naumenko. Welcome to Harmonious World. I'm delighted to be joined by Fotina Naumenko.
Thank you for having me.
That's brilliant. And Bespoke Songs has been out for a little while, and it was Grammy nominated.
Yes, that was so exciting. You start a project and you take it one step at a time, and at least I try not to think about what it's going to be like out in the world. I try not to overthink. I just do the work. But to have it get recognized was really, really special.
And it's a very interesting project because it's 20 tracks. Is that right?
Hmm.
I've started actually with If a Lover Brings an Orange. So the title track is actually a suite, isn't it, by Jonathan Newman?
Yes, it is. And that's one of my favorites. It's what, like a minute long, but it's such a little gem.
It's beautiful. It's really lovely. So basically what you did was you've taken works by composers who are influenced by female poets, is that right?
Yes, that was kind of the overarching theme that I wanted to bring was lyrics by female poets. But actually each of these pieces was a commission that I asked the composers for. So we actually started from scratch for each of these projects. So it was a request to a composer, do you have time for a commission from me? And then we started the conversation. I said, I'd like for all of the lyrics to be by female poets. Do you know of any that are inspiring to you? Or I presented options. So it really was a conversation with each composer, and we kind of started from scratch.
Ah, that's fantastic. Yeah, because Christine Faust, who's a American poet, isn't she?
She's so clever. Really, I love what she did because we gave Jonathan and I gave her quite a tall ask to take these poems from across 2 millennia in different languages and string them together into a cohesive narrative. I think the lyrics specifically in Bespoke Songs, the title track of 12 pieces on the album is the most innovative in terms of lyrics because generally you have one composer, one lyricist, set performers. Jonathan wanted to experiment with a variety of lyricists within one song cycle. So he was interested in exploring that idea. And I think that can end up being a bit erratic and eclectic if you don't do it right. But because we hired Christina Faust to make these small little vignettes that string it together, I think the end product really does work.
Yeah, it really does. I find that a fascinating concept then, so that you worked with the lyricists and the composers to get this collection of song cycles.
Right. And some of the really Christina Faust is the only lyricist we commissioned,
Ah,
but I worked with each of the composers to choose lyrics that inspired me and inspired them. So maybe it's good for me to take you back to the very beginning. In 2020, during the pandemic, all of my work was canceled. As you remember, everything shut down. So I took that time. I had a lot of time to think and consider what kind of music I wanted to make in the future and start planting seeds for some project, which ended up being this album. And I thought, right now everything is sort of in stasis. We don't know how long this will be. Now feels like the right time to commission the pieces. And obviously we didn't know it at the time, but the lockdown extended quite for a long time. So during that time, these pieces were envisioned, and I was meeting on Zoom with my composers and picking lyrics and kind of planting seeds. And then in 2022-ish, we started to premiere these works. And then 2023, we recorded across the span of about a year, and then released in 2024. So these conversations were kind of happening at the beginning, and I wanted the lyrics to inspire the composers because I did have to interpret their work, but they're the ones that had to come up with the sound world. So I really wanted the lyrics to speak to them because they were in charge of putting that into their piece.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can see why this then got that Grammy nomination, because it's not just beautiful music, but the collaboration and the concept behind it is just beautiful. And I love the fact that you chose to use female poets but didn't exclusively use female composers. That's quite interesting.
Thank you. And sometimes, and I've had this from this opinion voiced by some of my female composer friends, where they just want to be called a composer. They don't want to be called a female composer, or like
Absolutely.
you're just a doctor. You're not a female doctor, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to represent, but I didn't want to pigeonhole. So I appreciate that thought.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because, as you say, that's what we want. We want to just be known for what we do, not because we're a woman doing what we do.
Hmm.
Yeah. Very
Exactly.
good. Yeah. Right. At this point in the podcast, I would like to play, and this is my favorite track, and it's my podcast, so I get to choose the favorite track.
Oh, I'm
So,
so curious. Which one?
okay. It's How to See an Angel. And
Yeah.
part of the reason I like that is I love the arrangement using bassoon and piano. It's
Hmm.
very special.
Stand very still. Don't breathe, or if you do it silently. In a familiar place, or else a new place, which feels familiar. Under a tree by running water, or in a church or temple, where vibrations of the
So tell me about that one.
And it's interesting that you chose that one because I was particularly I was not nervous, but I feel like this was not what would come to mind. When you think about angels, don't you think harp or flute or something that's different?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So poor Carrie. This was one where I said, Carrie, I really want to work with Ryan Remind, who's my colleague at Shenandoah Conservatory. Marika Bernacchi on the piano is also on. I just wanted this combination, and so I said, you know what? Let's try this, even though it's not maybe stereotypically the sound world you'd immediately think of. So Carrie did such an amazing job with this assignment, with this challenge that I presented to her, where she took the bassoon and she made this kind of spiritual, earthy sound world out of it, which I thought worked so beautifully. It was angelic, but in a kind of an amber light, rather than kind of like Cupid playing a small harp.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful track. Um, your voice, you wouldn't have thought a soprano would work with a bassoon because they're so far apart in terms of the range. But I guess the bottom of your voice is about the top of a bassoon kind of thing. But
And maybe something about the bassoon's timbre kind of grounded my voice, and I think that if you're really collaborating and listening to each other, you affect each other with your timbres. So something about it really worked. It's really special. I agree.
yeah, I love that track. So well done to Carrie Megan for that one.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your background, about how you got to this point?
Sure. How much time we got? So-
Well, you're not that old, so it won't take that long.
Well, I think maybe I'll just take you through my musical journey. So I grew up Eastern Orthodox, and as you know, the choral tradition of the Orthodox Church is very, very deeply rooted in a cappella choral singing. And my father is the priest at a Russian Orthodox church in upstate New York, and my mom has been the choir director at that church for over 30 years now. So I grew up underfoot in the choir loft. I don't even remember when I started to sing because it was somewhere along the way when I was quite little. So singing has always been kind of part of my DNA. And then I started to take voice lessons, not quite seriously. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my teens. And I was lucky to live very close to the Eastman School of Music, which is a great conservatory in
Yeah.
Rochester. Which, when you grow up, you don't realize what you have. You think everyone has an Eastman in your backyard, which of course isn't true. So some of the Eastman students who attended the church, one in particular, Adam Foley, became my first voice teacher, and so he really helped shepherd and sort of guide me in those formative years between I think the age of 13 to age 16, 17, when I started to really consider becoming a singer for real, like really pursuing it. So I auditioned for schools and ended up attending Eastman. And for a long time, I thought that, um, and perhaps it was just the environment at the schools at the time. There was this mentality that if you're going to be a classical singer, opera is your only choice, basically, to make a life in this. And so that was kind of my track for undergraduate school, for graduate school. I did some work in regional opera, and I really enjoyed that. Um, but I think that really my heartstrings were always tugged towards ensemble singing from my choral background, as well as chamber music, so like smaller ensembles, new music. I've always had kind of an affinity for that repertoire as well. So once I started my full-time position at Shenandoah Conservatory teaching voice, which I also am really passionate about, um, there's just something more natural about the timelines of this repertoire that fits with the teaching job. So I've changed track from opera to more of the ensemble or new music settings that allow for me to be gone for a week or two instead of a 6-week chunk where you're staging a show.
Right. Yeah, but your voice obviously suits that, and I think especially as you were talking about some of the sort of shorter pieces because they're just so delightful in the real sense of the word. They really bring delight.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. And I do think that I get to explore a variety of emotions and kind of what I like the freedom that comes with creating a project on your own terms. Like I can really express my creativity in that. And sometimes when you have a high coloratura voice type, I would always feel like, oh, I have to play the maid or the bird. And so those are my Fach choices in the kind of in the operatic sphere. Obviously, that is a gross generalization, but I just really love having choices. I think I was born with the voice of a bird and the soul of a like a lusty contralto. So I'm just I'm trying to make it work.
That's very good. So what is next in terms of, do you have another project? Because this project is such a um it almost feels like it's got that quality of kind of your life's work almost. Do you know what I mean? It's just got a beautiful sense of of a line in the sand, perhaps, of where you are. So where are you going to take it?
That's such a good question and a terrifying one, isn't it? Because I think that is the question. I This came to me so organically, this idea, that I'm trying to not force the next big one. I'm trying to let it feel organic and come to me in time. So right now, I think I'm going to stick with my teaching and my freelance work with ensembles and some solo work, and then see what comes to me. I do think that the commissioning bug has bitten me for sure. I just love collaboration and making something out of nothing, so to speak. So perhaps down the road something else will come, but I need it to arise organically. I don't want to do something just for the sake of doing it. And and life work balance is also really important. And so I'm expecting a baby girl this August,
Oh well.
and so I suppose that's my next big project is to give birth to my second child. So I think that for me, in order to be a full person, I have to feel really balanced. So eventually something else will come to mind.
Right. Okay. Well, congratulations on the impending arrival of your daughter, your
Thank you
second
so much.
child. No, that's really exciting, and I love it. I think it's really important as musicians that we all consider that balance, because I think it makes you a better musician to have a full life.
Agreed. And I tell my students this all the time that if you spend all of your time in a practice room, you don't have anything to sing about once you get on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Funnily enough, I was interviewing a jazz pianist this morning, and we were having exactly that conversation about, you have to have the inspiration that has to come from somewhere, and if you are literally just practicing and playing all the time, you're not getting other influences.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah.
So it's and you can't always force when inspiration will happen. And so I'm trying not to.
No, absolutely. Well, I also think that we're now far enough distanced from the pandemic, from COVID-19 and the lockdowns, for us to be able to get some perspective on it. And I think that for many of us, it was a very creative time because we
Yeah,
had to be creative.
exactly. And some of us had perhaps more time for to listen to that inspiration as well, because we weren't running around quite so much as busy life usually makes us.
Absolutely. I mean, this podcast came about only because of lockdown, and all of a sudden, people were available, and I found that I was able to speak to people. And of course, it was the development of Zoom, because before the lockdown, we were kind of like, "Oh, what are you going to use that for?" Well, we found out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, that's very interesting that this came about. So you've been doing it since 2020?
Yeah, yeah, it's coming up for 5 years very soon. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you. It really is. It really is. It's a exciting part of my life for sure. But it was a real pleasure talking to you, Fotina, and congratulations on the Grammy nomination and your impending second child.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your interest and for your time. It was really fun to speak.
Let the light of late afternoon shine through the chinks in the barn.
Thank you for listening to that conversation with Fotina Naumenko. And what you're listening to now is Let Evening Come from her album Bespoke Songs. Please remember that you can find reviews of albums and live gigs on the blog at hilaryseabrook.blogspot.com or follow the link in the show notes. It would be great if you could share this episode with just one person. And do try and listen to some of the other episodes. There are nearly 270 now online. So I hope you have a very, very good week. And thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.